Hey everybody and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet, Rivon. I'm here in Jerusalem in the King David Hotel, and I have the pleasure to meet somebody that I have been a great fan of for not too long, actually. I discovered her work quite recently, Dr. Einat Wilf. She is an amazing scholar, I would say, in terms of Zionism and everything around that. And she has been a great inspiration to me in this whole, since the war started, in delivering a certain perspective that I couldn't find in the legacy approach to the issue. I will talk forever about you, but how are you doing?
Kind. Thank you. I'm okay.
Great. So many people don't know this, but I recently had a debate with Daniel Nikikiju, which many people who follow me are aware of. And in preparation to that, I actually contacted you, and I asked you. I showed you some of my notes, or I read them to you, and I asked your opinion, and you gave me a completely different view on things. And I actually really changed my perspective going into that debate, and I'm very happy with that, which is why I'm even personally much more thankful to you. And one of the things that you changed my perspective on was what it really means to be a Jew. Mm-hmm. And I just want to ask you if you could give me a summary of precisely that. What does it mean to you to be Jewish?
So I have a talk. People are welcome to look it up on YouTube, which talks about what does it mean to be the Jewish state. And I go through Jewish history and really the various changes and what it meant to be a Jew, especially in the modern era. First of all, to be Jewish, of course, is to have a very strong sense of connection to a people, to a history, and to a place. And that connection takes many shapes and many forms. But for me, the best understanding, still the one, is to think of Jews as a tribe. Mm-hmm. And that's how I think of myself, as a member of a people, as a member of a tribe. The idea of Judaism as a religion, and that's definitely what we talked about ahead of your debate, is something that not a lot of people are aware of, is actually a Western construct that's about 200 years old, that is not Jewish. It came outside of Judaism and actually created the notion of Judaism as a religion, as a faith, as something personal and private that does not involve any notion of collective loyalty. And it was designed in order to enable Jews to assimilate into the new collective ideas of the nation, to be French, to be German, and like being Jewish at that moment was essentially stripped of the collective solidarity, of the collective identity of the tribe, in order to fit it into the nation. And that created a new way of being Jewish, which a lot of people mistake for the only way of being Jewish, the one that has to do about faith. And on my Twitter handle, it says that I'm an atheist. And a lot of people, when they think that Jewish means religious, means faith, means belief, it doesn't make sense. And the reason that I emphasize it is precisely to challenge people's Western and pre-existing notions of what being Jewish is. But once you understand that being Jewish is first and foremost about belonging to a people with a history, with a language, with texts, with a connection to a place, then certainly since the 19th century, the question of whether or not you have a personal faith in God is almost, I wouldn't say marginal, but on a much different level than the question of your belonging to the people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Your Twitter bio says feminist, atheist, Zionist. Yes.
Exactly.
Which is, I have that memorized. It's very catchy and very nice.
Thank you.
Very, very good. So from there, it is quite evident that you have an approach that is more associated with a leftist or left-leaning position. And you were known in Israeli politics as a rather leftist figure and spokesperson. Have your views changed over time, especially over the last decades or decade, in terms of how to approach the conflict?
That is certainly the place where my views have gone through the most substantial transformation, in the sense of what is required to get to peace. Because I grew up in the Israeli peace camp, which especially when I formed my political opinions in the 80s and the 90s, was very much associated with this very compelling idea known as land for peace. The idea being that none of Israel's Arab neighbors were willing to make peace with it when it was born, and they kept fighting and assaulting Israel, and Israel kept winning, and especially in 1967, which was its most kind of dramatic victory, Israel came into possession of substantial territory. And the thinking was, okay, now the Arab countries will definitely understand that there's no defeating Israel by force, and they'll be willing to negotiate. And Israel now has these bargaining chips, these territories that it can bargain in return for peace. So that became the very compelling idea of land for peace. We're just going to give the land and we'll have peace. Like, finally, they'll just leave us alone and we'll have peace. And for a while, it seemed a very compelling idea. This was the basis for negotiation with Egypt. We gave back the Sinai Peninsula. They gave us officially peace, not very peaceful, but yes. And then, Jordan and Syria, we all negotiated with them on the idea, and with the Palestinians in the 90s. The idea was the Palestinians will get a state in the West Bank and Gaza, and we'll have peace, land for peace. Mm-hmm. And like many Israelis of the peace camp, I see in the Camp David negotiations in 2000, in the 2008 negotiations, the Palestinians essentially being offered the land, West Bank and Gaza, into the military occupation, capital in East Jerusalem, no settlements, and they walk away twice. There were some other times too, but really those two times, they walk away and they follow it up with a campaign of violence. And there are no dissenting Palestinian voices who say, don't walk away, keep negotiating or get us our state. So at that point, I'm like, there must be something else going on. The Palestinians must want something else. And what I realized is that they've always told us what they wanted. We just didn't listen. Or when we listened, it sounded so crazy. We're like, nah, that's not serious. But they told us from the river, from the Jordan River, to the sea, to the Mediterranean Sea, Palestine will be free. Of what? Of a sovereign Jewish state in any part of the land.
There is a line that you even just mentioned, leave us alone.
Yes.
That is stuck in my head. Tell me briefly about that.
So I was recently in a talk in LA, and there were a lot of people there from the entertainment industry. And after my talk, one of them comes up to me and he says, look, I'm listening to all the slogans and the anti-Israel demonstrations, and they're all like, from the river to the sea, free, free Palestine, one solution, intifada, revolution. He was like, I'm in entertainment. This is very catchy. We have nothing, we sit in our vigils, we like sing Am Yisrael Chai. Like, so you know what? I have something for us. I told him, sure. He says, leave us alone. And I laughed and I thought, you know what? It's actually really good because it goes to something very deep. We really just want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. So take the West Bank, take Gaza. This is why we get out of Gaza in 2005. We tried negotiating. The Palestinians walked away. We're like, you know what? Even if few Palestinians are not going to say yes, we're just going to get out because we just want you to leave us alone. So we're getting out. It's something very, very deep that we just want to be left alone to build our state, to make it the best it can be, and they won't leave us alone.
The disengagement from Gaza, I know there has been a lot of controversy on it, and even at that time, it was among a part of the population and politics, it was a very unpopular move. But another part of the population thought this would be a path or a key to peace. What do you think, in retrospect, do you think it was a mistake to disengage from Gaza?
So actually, the disengagement from Gaza was hugely popular.
Okay.
In fact, it was so popular that Sharon, after the disengagement, was on track to getting like the most votes of any party probably in Israeli history going back to the 50s. It was hugely popular precisely because of the Leave Us Alone. You were like, good, we're getting out of it. They won't bother us anymore. Now, Sharon, and the idea was, we're getting out, and if they dare bother us, if they will continue to fight against us from Gaza, we'll fight back. So the issue is, and then Sharon went into a coma. So Sharon probably would have fought back, but the fact that Netanyahu has been essentially an appeaser ever since, where he never fought back. You had these occasional wars in Gaza, but they were always cut short. They never continued. Over the years, Netanyahu kind of began to almost look at Hamas as something with which he can accommodate. So the question is, was there an alternative whereby we get out of Gaza, but we make sure that Gaza doesn't threaten us? And that's a question for which I don't have a good answer. If you're saying that the only thing that could have happened is what happened, then of course it was a mistake. But was it the only way that we could have behaved after we got out of it? That's less clear.
That brings to mind an issue that is currently arising. Israel is now fighting back because a massacre happened. I walk among the Israeli population today as I'm visiting Israel, and I see that I see the pain of that massacre in everyone's eyes. I hear it in the tone when people just speak. It is pretty brutal. But now that Israel is fighting back, there are a lot of misguided people in the world who immediately give the response that this is genocide, this is racism, and they even go as far as saying that Zionism is inherently a genocidal or a racist idea. Now, I read some of the records of the early, the founders of the State of Israel, and you find there clear, like discussions among them and the acknowledgement that Arabs will live in this country, that they will most likely be in an Arab state alongside, and that they are working toward all of that. However, on the other side, there seems to be no acknowledgement of a Jewish state. I have two questions I want to ask. The first one in connection to this. When it comes to Zionism, what can you say in response to the ridiculous accusation that Zionism is inherently a racist, genocidal ideology?
So one of the benefits of me having studied this for so many years by now is that when people claim that, oh, now they've reached that conclusion, I'm like, no, you're not going to fool me. That was your pre-conclusion. Now you're trying to push it on everyone as if it's like some realization. So that's first of all, and in that sense, no one can fool me as if they just achieved that conclusion, because I've seen it build over decades. Zionism as racism was promoted by the Arab world and the United Nations in 1975. And do you know why they promoted it in 1975? Did they sit and think and study and they were like, we concluded that Zionism is racism? No. The United Nations just passed a resolution that the United Nations are committed to fighting racism. So the Soviet Union and the Arab world were like, great. Now that it is universally agreed that racism is bad, we're going to slap this onto Zionism. So that everyone knows that Zionism, by extension, is evil. So the causality is exactly the other way around. The idea of sovereign Jews who are masters of their fate, is a theological challenge, nothing less than that, to at least two civilizations, Islam and Christianity, in large parts, that have been built on the theology of Jewish dispossession, Jewish misery, Jewish helplessness, and to have Jews say, we're done. We're not going to play that helpless, miserable, powerless person anymore. That is such a challenge. That those civilizations are essentially, from their deepest subconsciousness, fighting back.
Yeah.
And that's what October 7th was. October 7th was essentially a Muslim theology saying, you will not build a state. You will not defend yourselves. The only kind of Jews that we are going to accept in this region are helpless, defenseless, the kinds that we will butcher at our will. That's the only kind of Jews that are acceptable to us.
I told you about my past, right? About
Yes.
my upbringing. I grew up in a very religious Muslim family, and I'm aware of Muslim culture. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand what is going on because they are not familiar with that background. But I learned from a very early age. I remember I was in first grade when and I was in Germany, but I was raised by religious Muslims with a religious group around them. I learned then that in a near future, possibly, there will be a time, because of a prophecy said by Muhammad, that we will fight the Jews and we will kill them. And they are so bad that even rocks and trees will say, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, except for one tree, which is the Gargat tree, which is the tree of the Jews, which is, all of this sounds very insane when you are outside of it. But to many Muslims around the world, this is completely normal. This is, self-explanatory, natural. And people have this whole conception. And throughout the history of Islam, it was a very normal thing that Jews are these people who are pathetic. They are a minority. They do whatever we say. And if they misbehave, we put them in their place. But now the fact that Jews actually have the power to defend themselves and preserve themselves, this is seen as unacceptable.
Precisely. And what you said, that if they misbehave, we put them in their place, that's Israel. From a very large Arab and Muslim perspective, the very existence of a Jewish state is essentially Jews misbehaving and having to be put in their proper place. That's exactly it. Like you said, for 1,400 years before Zionism, the only Jews that were known across the Arab and Muslim world were stateless, dispossessed, weak, at the mercy of Arab and Muslim rulers, and essentially headed to the dustbin of history. There was a moment when the founder of the Hashemite family, Faisal, was willing to look at a kind of Jewish entity under what he believed would be the great Arab rule that will succeed the Ottoman Empire. But there was never a moment when there was like an Arab acknowledgement of Jewish nationhood as being on equal level, and therefore of equal claim to the land, of equal claim to dignity and sovereignty. I don't think it's impossible, by the way. I very much believe in the possibility of a transformation of religions, theologies. As an atheist, I always make it very clear, religions are not really from God. At the end of the day, they are human systems of interpretation. And the best theologians, what they do is they always adapt the interpretations to modernity, to the current moment, and then they say, this is what God really wanted.
Yeah.
But so I believe Islam can be transformed, and I'm seeing elements of this in the Gulf, to being pro-Zionist, to looking at the Jews in the land and saying, actually, that's what Islam really intended. Because we saw it in Christianity. Christianity, until the 17th century, is theologically opposed to Jews as equals, to Jews as sovereign, even more than Islam. Islam came 7 centuries later. Christianity is directly against the Jews. And in early Christianity, the dispossession, the ruin of the Jewish people is the proof that Christianity is the true path. So until the 7th century, that's very much a Christian idea. And then beginning with the Reformation, when people start to read the Bible directly. When you start to read the Bible directly and you read about the Israelites, Israelites are pretty impressive, right? There's like a kingdom and they're warriors and, they're great characters. So begins actually a transformation of looking at the Jews of Europe as the Israelites, rather than these miserable people. They are the descendants of kings and heroes. And that begins the process of the idea of restorationism, what today we call Christian Zionism. So today you have a substantial share of the Christian Western world that is pro-Zionist. So I think Islam can go through a similar transformation where people look at Islamic and ancient texts and they say, actually, the true interpretation of those texts is in a way that supports the Jews and Zionists being here. And I've talked with a lot of Muslim scholars and theologians, and they told me, yeah, we have enough texts that if we interpret them that way, we can make that case.
Everything can be reinterpreted.
Exactly.
Today, the Christians are pretty much like the greatest allies of Israel.
The ones who come from that branch.
Yeah. Okay.
The ones who come from, a lot of secular people in the West don't understand still how Christian they are. There's a great book by Tom Holland called Dominion, How Christianity Made the West, and he shows that even people who view themselves entirely secular, they still are they're a continuing secularized version of Christian ideals. And the anti-Zionism in a lot of those circles continues the theological anti-Zionism of early Christianity that cannot look at Jews having power and let that be.
A few final questions. You have seen it so many times. Everybody has seen it. There is this map that always goes around, which is of the shrinking Palestinian land. It is nonsensical. But I want to ask you, because I'm just having my humble opinions here. Was there ever a Palestinian land, and did Zionists steal Palestinian land to create their own state?
So first, I have to highly recommend a piece by Dr. Shani Moore, a brilliant colleague, called The Mendacious Maps. Look it up. It essentially rips apart this whole lie. But let's talk about the word Palestine. Where does it come from? Emperor Adrian, putting down the Jewish revolt 2,000 years ago, had it enough with the Jews trying to be sovereign, right? This is already almost a pre-Christian idea. And he changes the name of the province of Judea, from which the name Jew comes from. I don't know what other languages you speak, but in every language in the world except English and French, everybody knows we're the Judeans, Yehudim, right? Yahud or Judeo. He changes the name of the province of Judea to Palestina in order to sever the relationship. Ironically, what happens is that in the European lands of the Roman Empire, the word Palestina, Palestine, is still associated with the Jews. So if you look at the use of the name Palestine over the centuries, it literally just means the geographical region where the Jews once held their sovereign state. Now, the name gets revived when the League of Nations, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire is gone. The thinking is of now the people of the Ottoman empires, the Turks, the Kurds, the Armenians, the Jews, the Arabs, will now have sovereignty, states. So it's clear that the Jews will have some of it, and where else than in Palestine, which was understood by everyone to mean Jewish. This is why the opening of the League of Nations acknowledgement of the Jewish right to self-determination is recognizing the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine, which made sense to everyone at the time because everyone knew that Palestine meant the geographical region where the Jews once had their kingdom. And then it says, and the grounds for reconstituting their land, their home there. So it was reconstituting. They understood that the Jews being in Palestine are reconstituting, rebuilding an ancient kingdom, an ancient home. The notion of Palestine being Arab emerges really only in the 60s. Because what do Israelis do? the colonial era is over. The Ottoman Empire is gone. Finally, the British are gone. And the Jewish people, finally having outlived all these empires, going back to the Roman Empire, finally restore their sovereignty. What do? They do what every self-respecting people in history did when the colonial people were gone. They called their country by their name, right? Mm-hmm. So Siam becomes Thailand, and the Gold Coast becomes Ghana, and Palestine becomes Israel, because Palestine was the colonial name, and Israel is the original indigenous name. Once the Jews called the land Israel, in order to present the Jews as foreign, what you said, thieves, interlopers, Arabs began to hijack the name Palestine and to say, actually, we are Palestine. Whereas previously everyone understood it was Jews. And I love it because sometimes you see on the internet, oh, look, Palestine existed. And they show like the Palestine football team. And if you look closely, all the names are like Kranauer and it's like all Jewish names and Goldberg and like, because this was the Jewish football team of the Jewish state in the making. And the Palestine Philharmonic Orchestra was the orchestra of Jewish exiles that became the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. So this is a classic and very much almost the original hijacking of the Arabs of something that was very Jewish in order to present the Jews as thieves rather than the original owners.
What's very interesting is there's a record of in the early, I think from 1920, the first Palestinian Arab conference where they discussed the land. The Arabs living there say that Palestine shall not be a separate nation. It is part of Syria and should be merely a district of that. So they never even had the notion of having a separate Arab-Palestinian nation there. Yeah. They just considered it part of Syria.
And they even say more in those conferences that Palestine is a colonial name. I mean, they recognize it as something foreign, as something... And the Jews recognized it as something foreign, why they called themselves Israel as soon as they could.
Final question. Everyone always asks me when we talk about this if there is any hope for the future in this whole conflict. So I just want to ask you, what do you think?
My hope is that ultimately, especially the Arabs and Muslims, they're more important than anyone because I mean, the Arab and Muslim conquests of the region were hugely successful, right? Well done. So that means that the Jews go back to the fact that we're a tribe. You know, we don't, when Christianity emerged from the Jewish tribe, what it did as really the most radical action is that it severed the idea of a universal God, which was the Jewish innovation, from a specific connection to a land and a people. And that's how it was able to expand, and that's what Islam did, and that's why Islam and Christianity are so successful, because they're not connected to a specific people or a specific land. But the Jews are, and that's why we're small, because we're a tribe, and tribes only expand with some people joining through marriage, essentially, and people being born, but that's it. We don't go to Latin America and make everyone Christian. You know, that's not an option. Or make everyone Jewish. So we're always going to be a tiny, tiny, tiny minority in an Arab and Muslim world. That's it. Which means that as long as we care about being sovereign in the land of Israel, we need the Arab and Muslim world to acknowledge that we are not foreigners and not colonialists and not outsiders. We have a history here. We need an understanding in the Arab and Muslim world of Zionism as an Abrahamic idea. That Zionism is merely the modern expression of the Jewish historical connection to the land. And as I said, I believe that the Arab and Muslim world are actually experiencing right now the beginning of a transformation, at least in some places, of this acknowledgement. And this is where I find hope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Einat Wilf. I loved this. I admire you. I recommend everyone to read your books, to listen to your lectures, which I benefited from. And thanks everyone for watching. I will see you again. Share this, subscribe. Have a fantastic day. Until next time.